Hello, guys, and welcome to the Improving Season podcast with me, Pascal Floor, and the other guy, I think he's called Steve Hall, and some socks in the background if you're watching video. Socks and underwear from Hugo. So welcome, socks and underwear, and Steve.
Hi guys, I have a clear background. I'm nice and professional over here.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I don't have that huge of a flat. So you guys are actually, you have a pretty decent home, Steve.
It's quite nice. It's all right.
Yeah, it is. And our place it's all right as well. I mean, it's a little bit outside of Berlin, so the standard is a little bit higher for a lower price. But still, it's a shitty place. So Katie is not at home, so I can say that out loud. And well, she wants to move anyway. She wants to buy a house at some point.
The last place I was at, you can confirm, was very substandard. This is quite an upgrade.
God. So I have my standards when it comes to hotel rooms and stuff like that is not really high. I've been playing in a band for 10 years, or I was playing in a band for 10 years, and mate, I slept even on the floor sometimes. But there was also often a little bit of alcohol involved, so you don't really give a shit anyway. But so my standards aren't really that high. Most of the time, I just need a place to crash. But this place in Birmingham, Ibis budget, God, that was a shithole. God, that was a proper shithole.
It was just an all-in-one. There was just the shower was right by the bed. It was so convenient.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get out of bed when I wanted to take a piss. just rolled over to the side and
just a wet room. Just be anywhere. We should have known it wasn't going to be great, considering it was called Ibis Budget.
Yeah, but
we did get the cheapest one.
So I always had good experience with Ibis before that.
I think
even with budget hotels. But okay, that always differs from city to city, I guess. So in London, of course, the competition is quite high, so the standard needs to be somewhat decent. But yeah, maybe in Birmingham, I don't know. Maybe it is Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham. It was quite nice in Birmingham, to be fair. I quite liked it. I was impressed.
Just for the listeners, because we're rambling just about shitty hotels in Birmingham. So it isn't just a random rant we are having, but we had our Ultimate Coach Seminar there last weekend together with our man, AJ. And yeah, 50 participants. So it was amazing.
Maybe even more. We didn't even count.
Maybe even more, yeah.
The room was more full than it should have been.
No, it wasn't. I did count at some point. So we had 51 people there, 51 attendees. Enough chairs, sorry. But the place, unfortunately, didn't really put enough chairs in that room at first. But after a while, they actually gave us some more chairs to sit on, which was kind of them, I think. No, but in all honesty, it was an amazing weekend. But as we've all experienced a couple of times, in that show here, whenever we are traveling, we are getting back quite shattered, and that happened this time again. And once again, my flights got delayed. I don't know what it is. I already told you my conspiracy theories, and that is probably because Angela Merkel is sitting in Berlin and has a huge impact on with the EU and the Brexit. And I think that the Brexit and the UK is now doing some kind of a complot against Germany and especially Berlin. So they are, intentionally delaying the flights just because they can.
Why not? Brexit for the win.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going into my political views here. That didn't reflect them, by the way, that comment. Just to be clear. I don't mind the Germans. They're all right.
Yeah, they're
blue eyes.
All right.
It's good.
Yeah, blue eyes.
Blonde hair. Always, Hugo, basically, through and through. My best friend.
Always wearing military boots, eating sauerkraut.
I think people can confirm Pascal did look like a proper German this weekend. Especially in your military coat and then all wrapped up.
That one. That's true. But I could have been Russian as well, I think.
Maybe, yeah. We have to ask Sammy, who also both of us met for the first time. She was a client of mine at one point, good friend of Pascal. So it was really nice to catch up with people, and we got a lot of nice feedback from this as well. So we're kind of talking as if we're talking to them, because a lot of them will be listening, which we really appreciate.
Yeah. Man, we are just talking about random stuff here in the first 5 minutes, right?
Something of interest I wanted to bring up, actually. I think because part of the reason you were knackered, because you probably didn't sleep that well, you got back late. I had no reason for that. But I think literally I was so stressed on that day. If anyone saw on kind of like Instagram, I was talking about how I don't like public speaking. It's not necessarily I don't like it. I'm just not confident at it. And Pascal was saying how he could literally see the stress response in action with this rash coming up my neck, which I didn't realize. But I could feel the stress response in the day because it was cold. So I thought I was kind of shivering because of being cold, maybe. And I wasn't wearing that much. But I think I was also just shivering because I was just that nervous, which like, this is how nervous I get.
I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable with making you aware that you're getting a rush every time when you're speaking publicly. But I just noticed that because of the last time, the last RP seminar where we presented as well, I've seen it there. And this time it came up again. So I noticed that, and I didn't want to make you any kind of, I don't know, insecure for future presentations or so.
Now everyone's
you know that when
out.
someone when someone is correcting you on a habit of yours or making you aware of something, of a tic or so you're having, right? And then after that you cannot unsee that, and it starts to annoy you as well. Yeah. I have it, right? And this is something I don't want to happen. So I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable or make you aware of something that is happening and you can't do anything against that.
It's super frustrating because I don't even need to be or want to be nervous or worried. It's like just I don't know, just an innate response to that sort of activity. But I think the more, like anything, the more you do it, the more you practice at it, the better it will get. And we have quite a few potential, quite a few actual seminars that we're presenting at in the future. So at least I did have some feedback that people didn't notice, which is good.
Cool. So enough of this just blabbing on for on unrelated topics. Or it was related, but not really that important for the listeners, I guess, with listening to us rambling. How was your last week then, leading into or up to Birmingham?
So I think last week I talked about how it's just becoming a bit of a chore eating all the food. I don't want to complain about it because complaining about eating a lot is complaining on a high level. But it is surprising how actually there's such an element of discomfort that is probably as discomforting as sometimes when you're dieting where you want to eat more. Like I want to eat that much less, that it's like a similar discomfort. Stress is stress. Like eating more than your body wants to has become stressful to a certain extent. So it was particularly relevant to this weekend. We were talking about it where actually when you're traveling, it's kind of easy to diet when you're not like super fatigued because food availability is pretty low and you can make pretty good choices at restaurants. Like you did a really good job keeping those restaurant meals very, very low calorie. But for me, like massing, trying to get over 4,000 calories in was a nightmare. Like just drinking liters of chocolate milk, tons of bagels, hot cross buns have been a go-to recently. It's just like, how can I keep this, especially when you're trying to go moderately low fat and then like high carb. But
and especially if you are busy on that day. I mean, when you're traveling, I could potentially see that it's not really that big of a deal, but you are like present on that location, but also presenting yourself. So a lot of your day was already gone where you are probably not eating, right? And then stuffing your face. I know that, or I do remember on Saturday when you went home to your apartment or the hotel room that you said like, oh, I have to pick up some bagels because I have to still eat something. Yeah, I went straight to bed. So
yeah, I would have preferred to go straight to bed, but I had to get in. I came back 4 pounds lighter, which isn't going to be 4 pounds of fat or anything like that. It definitely isn't. It's water weight, but it's just you see how much, if you don't keep it up, this is why massing to a point becomes actually a bit of a job, and it is difficult. But yeah, I'm complaining on a high level, but it was the busyness of the Saturday particularly. I didn't really want to eat. I think I didn't eat anything proper until 2 p.m. when we had the Subway. Before that, I had a protein shake, and that's all I had because I just couldn't stomach anything else because of nerves, obviously.
No, same for me. I only had a skewer. So I think, and 2 protein. No, that's not true. Just the skewer, and that was it. and then up until Subway as well. So I didn't really have much either. So yeah.
You're deloading right now, or you've just finished?
No, it is my deload week this week. Because last week I pushed it for another week, and towards the end of the week, I could already feel the impact of the overreaching week. So I made good use of the last mesocycle, that's for sure. But on the latter half of the last week, I was already like, oh shit, I really have to be cautious here, because otherwise I'm going to Birmingham and be super wrecked and possibly even have a cold or something like that, because I already experienced cold-like symptoms. And I thought that I'm possibly just overreached, or possibly even actually now catching a cold. And I wanted to avoid that, because I didn't want to stand on the presenter stage and, I don't know, have fever or something like that. So it was about time to actually do the deload. And this week I took it really, really lightly, just to allow for plenty of recovery, so that I can actually start all over fresh for the new mesocycle. And this is something we talked about off air, that my approach to something like a deload changed massively over the past years. Simply because in the past, I sometimes even pushed it too hard in the deload, but you don't get either of both worlds. So when you're pushing too hard, you're probably still not pushing as hard as you usually do. So you are not properly overreaching or doing any kind of progressive overload, causing any kind of enough stimulus for adaptations. But you're pushing too hard to allow for plenty or adequate recovery. So you're not really achieving any one of those two goals, and thus probably ending up spinning your wheels in the long term. And thus now when I approach a deload, I rather go even lighter and take a couple of more rest days than actually doing a little bit too much, because there's no point in it.
I always think less is more in a deload week. You're completely right. There's that you don't want to go in that dead zone where you're still accumulating fatigue, but you're not overloading. So you're just doing, like, that's when people need 2 weeks of deloading, because they just are being really stubborn and not training light enough. And I think if you are one of those individuals, to bring up AJ, because I know he's talked about this before, is he struggles to go into the gym and do a deload. So he just takes days off. So I think that is something that's legitimately you can do. So maybe you do half of your week and then take the rest of the half off, or you just take if you can't hold yourself back at all, then don't go, because it's very similar to don't go to a restaurant if you can't pick something appropriate. Just don't go.
Absolutely. And when I went to Birmingham, I didn't train for 4 days, simply because I didn't feel like it. I wanted to train at Birmingham Ultimate Fitness because it seems like a decent place, and I wanted to train with other people, but I just felt like trash. And I know that there's no benefit in me going in there, even though that that I would like to, just because I want to, but my body tells me different, or something different response. There's no point in then doing that. I did it a couple of times in the past, and I most of the time always paid the price, and it was not beneficial. So I just said okay, I take a couple of days off here, allow for plenty of recovery. And I could even already feel it on Sunday that even though the weekend was stressful and exhausting, because traveling in conjunction with being around a lot of people, presenting at the same time, being on your feet the entire day is just stressful in it for itself. But I could already feel that I'm getting better than before. And that is the main purpose of the deload, that you should gradually see you improving or you feeling better over the time spent on a deload. And then I went back home and on, when was it? Yesterday, I forgot to set the alarm, which never actually happens to me. I was quite perplexed when I woke up and be like, what is going on here? Because I never forget to set my alarm. I'm such a control freak, and it just surprised myself, actually. And this is the same what I said to Katie, because she woke up and said
why are you asleep?
Want to go? Didn't you want to go to your training session? Did you forget to set your alarm or what? And I was like, yeah. And she basically just said to me, this is not like you. So, yeah.
Well, why is your alarm not just set every day for the same time? Can't you do that?
Yeah, I could do that, but then I have to turn it down on rest days.
Yeah, I just have I have a silent
because it's
alarm.
set to 5 a.m. in the morning, and I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning when I'm not training. It's a little bit too early then.
I have a silent alarm on my Fitbit, which is good if you share a bed with someone. Although you have to be quite sensitive because it's just a vibration on your wrist, which I have rarely slept through, or I've turned it off and not remembered that I've done that. But yeah, it's so training wise was deload for you, so not super exciting. And I think that was a good chat about kind of deloads. Loads of people get super stressed about deloads. Something we want to cover in more depth. We will be doing that at some point. Something we spoke about on the weekend. What was it? Losing opportunities.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity here. We're going to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
You've heard it here now. We're going to keep accountable. And so my week was 4th week of my mesocycle. I literally started my 5th week today. This is where I'm getting nervous for like every squat session that I come to. Something about squats and deadlifts, but specifically like deadlifts off the floor, not so much Romanian deadlifts. I don't know why. They're not as scary. Something about that. But yeah, high bar squats. So had a really good 5th week of my mesocycle today. Leg session was really good. One of the most challenging leg sessions for quads specifically, because I'm splitting up still AM and PM. One of the most challenging sessions ever. I managed to hit 160 for 12 and then 150. I did 4 sets after the 160. And I was kind of like, shall I do this? And I was like, actually, my rep performance isn't going down like as much as I thought it might. So I got 12. I literally got 12, 11, 10, 9. So I was pretty
bad.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that. Should we get to questions?
Yeah, sure thing. I have them already opened up here. So let's get to the first one. So Don Alberti, dealing with joint pain, ? So I think that probably there's not a market for it. I don't think that anyone is going to buy joint pain, because probably no one is interested in that unless it's some kind of a masochist or so. But other than that, I don't think that anyone is going to buy that. So
what was the question? I feel like I heard.
Dealing with the joint pain.
Dealing it. I'm a joint pain dealer.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know, painful.
No, on a serious note though. How to deal with joint pain. I mean, hopefully you're not pushing through it, because when there's damage to connective tissue, this is probably not the best thing to actually then keep doing what you're doing already. So I would highly advise, first and foremost, go and seek a professional. Now that this is off the table, try to just alter your technique, form, stance, whatever it is you're doing. There's clearly pain, so don't just push through it. Try to find a way that allows you to still keep training. Most of the time that is possible, even for something like when you are experiencing, I don't know, discomfort in your elbows, shoulders, when it comes to benching. Alter just a little bit the grip, slightly modify it, and most of the time that fixes it already. But other than that, if it's still persistent, I mean, go and seek a professional.
Yeah, I think you're completely right in the fact that seeking professional help is definitely the way to go, because, I mean, joint pain, it could be anything. We don't really know. And as personal trainers, my kind of, when I remember asking Quinn Hennock, like, as a personal trainer, what's the best advice I can give to like a trainee who's dealing with pain? It's like, just tell them not to do anything that causes pain, essentially. And like you said, you can find a workaround generally. And then the only thing I can remember is that I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if it's both of them, but I know gelatine, like you can supplement with gelatin, and that can help like recover joints and things. Don't expect it to be a miracle, but you can search that, like gelatin and joint pain. I'm sure there's a protocol you can follow for that. And maybe collagen, I think that also can have some positive effects. But I know a lot of people like use, is it like glucosamine and chondroitin or something? But there's not a lot of good evidence.
Can I just interfere there?
Yeah.
Because when it comes to collagen and all that kind of stuff, there are different types of collagen. And so I was looking into that quite meticulous when I was recovering from a hip. Because of that, because there are different types of collagen, you supplementing with that there's not really that much scientific literature on it to support any kind of benefits in the recovery of your connective tissues. So, or collagen fibers in that sense. So I would be hesitant in making those kind of recommendations because the scientific literature right now doesn't really support that. So yeah, just on that note.
Maybe just gelatin then. I'm pretty sure I've seen it on gelatin where people can take that kind of like as a pre-workout, and then there's been some positive responses post. Again, like I said, supplementation, probably not the way you really want to be focusing on.
Yeah, and I mean, when it then comes to something like joint pain, I have a really hard time, and I think I know what studies you're talking about, but I still have a really hard time imagining that when you are already experiencing joint pain, that this will help you in that situation. I think that because the pain sensors in that area, especially when it comes to connective tissue, there aren't really a lot of nerves attached there or pain sensors there. So when you are experiencing pain there, then it's most of the time already quite severe of a stage of either damage that is being caused there or proper compression or so. And in that sense, it's just like, okay, I don't think that the supplementation with those kind of things will probably avoid any kind of damage or help you recovering that when you are still experiencing joint pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, potentially it's more of a preventative than a one to do whilst you've got it. I just know I'd seen the gelatin route, so I just thought it was something to mention, but I absolutely agree with that. I know, again, I don't think supplementation is generally the way to go. One thing you mentioned there actually is quite often these things happen, and when we think about kind of recovering from training, one of the biggest things to get right is to train with the amount of volume that is actually appropriate for you. Quite often pain comes around because you're just doing over the dose what you should be, so maybe scale it back for a period of time.
I'd just be really cautious with that and also look into that a little bit more. So when it is fixed with modifying, I don't know, whatever it is you're doing or finding a different exercise for that particular thing, and it solves that, it's great, but I would still just double check it. It's simply because sometimes you won't see any kind of symptoms flaring up, but still there's something going on, repetitive damage. This is something I can actually say from personal experience. When it comes to the degradation of my hip joint, most of the time you didn't really feel the degradation up until the 3rd grade of the connective tissue damage, and 4th grade is already bone-on-bone contact. So the first 2 stages you don't even feel. Right, so if you're already feeling joint pain and you are worried about that, get it checked out. I mean, it's such a quick thing you can do, and just to be on the safe side, and possibly avoiding potentially a really long-lasting damage or irreversible damage is just or should be worth the time investment.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen is they turn you away saying it's nothing serious, and that's great. That's what you hope to happen, and that's the worst thing. So,
absolutely. So, moving on to Sean. Hey, in my first year of proper training and nutrition, and have been massing at a steady rate for 7 months now. Started low body fat, but now feel need to cut some body fat. Would you recommend a short aggressive cut or something else? With what training volume adjustments, if any? And do I need a maintenance phase before going back to massing? Thanks in advance for your brilliant information as always.
Cool. Shall I head that up first? Yeah. And then as always, you can patch up the holes. So with this one, I'd say you could do an aggressive diet. It depends. First of all, I would have a look at how much body fat you're holding. Is a short aggressive diet that is basically a mini cut of 4 to 6 weeks, where maybe you lose a percentage of body weight per week, going to be enough to set you up for more massing, because essentially what a minicut is doing, or most of the time is doing, is setting you up for more massing. Whereas longer cuts, I mean, obviously they can set you up for more massing, but they're going to remove more body fat that could set up way longer massing. So if maybe you're male, I think, Sean, so if he's sitting like near 20% body fat, and for him that's quite high, potentially a minicut is not the way to go, because maybe you can get down to 15 if you're lucky, but for you that won't be a great starting point. For others it might be, maybe for you it is. That might be appropriate. Whereas maybe if you are up at that high point, then doing a longer cut would be better, where you can get down to like 12% or something like that. That'll buy you a bit more time. So it depends kind of how much body fat you've got to lose. And I'd also say it depends on your experience. So if you've never done an aggressive diet before, if you're not very experienced with doing that sort of thing, if you haven't got a stress-free environment, basically if you're not set up for success to do something that is like really aggressive, to take off a good chunk of body fat, it might not be the route to go down. So a longer cut would suit you better in that scenario. That's really, I think, the choice between both would be, are you experienced doing mini cuts, aggressive dieting? If you're not, then probably a longer cut might suit you better. If you've got a stress-free environment, then a mini cut could suit. If you haven't, then possibly a longer cut could suit better. And if you've got a substantial amount of body fat to lose, then again, potentially a longer cut would be better than a mini cut. So kind of take those points into consideration to where you want to go next. And then in terms of, do you need a maintenance phase? I'd never say it's something you need. Would it be something that we might say is a good idea? I'd say after a mini cut, no, because the point of the mini cut really is to continue getting straight back into massing. You shouldn't need to kind of take that period of maintenance. You've only been in a dieting phase for up to 6 weeks. For a longer dieting period, probably a period of maintenance would be nice to really allow that body fat to kind of settle at that position, to allow you to bring down training volumes again, so you can start building up into your massing phase. And when you're doing a longer cut, you're kind of trying to avoid a rebound, whereas with a mini cut, you're almost trying to ignite a rebound. And you haven't seen so many adaptations with a shorter cut. So I think after a longer one, probably a good idea to have a maintenance phase. After a mini cut, no. And in terms of then training volumes, how to manipulate those, typically when you're cutting, especially for a longer period of time, your maximal recoverable volume will come down. So you probably won't be able to progress with volume as much. So you might go from having done set progressions to choosing more repetition or load progressions, assuming that your form and everything is already really perfect. And then, so for a mini cut, one of the great things with a mini cut, because it is short, you don't even need to worry too much about pushing volume so much, and it can act as a bit of a lower volume phase for you anyway. So for both scenarios, basically a bit less volume overall, but I wouldn't, like, first week would be very similar to your usual massing mesocycles, just progressions thereon aren't going to be as rapid as a massing phase. You can more so progress with load and repetitions rather than so much sets. But just see it out, see how well recovered you are. Probably with the longer, slower cut, you have more recoverability. You won't be as aggressive. You can probably make a bit more progress via set progressions potentially. Whereas when you're doing the mini cut, that's very aggressive, the fatigue just accumulates so fast, and we're looking to potentially resensitize a little bit to volume. Just keep your volume at kind of a more moderate amount and don't worry about pushing it up aggressively. I think that answers it for the most part.
Hey, covered it all. So yeah, I think we can move on to the next question. And that comes from Abdullah. Sorry, Abdullah. Didn't mean to mock your name or so.
Abdullah.
Seriously not. By the way, have you, I mean, it is our generation, but have you ever seen Team America?
Yes.
Mate, Team America is the best.
I haven't seen it for so long, though. I need to watch that now.
So, funny enough, it's, I think 2 months ago or so, I had the theme music or theme song in my head, and I played it to Katie together with the video, right? And I laughed my ass off, right? And she didn't know about Team America, and she was just like, "What the fuck is this shit?" And I was just like, "Come on, Katie, we have to watch it at some point. We have to watch it." And she doesn't want to watch it with me.
Charlotte would be the same. She'd be like, "I'm not watching this shit."
God, that is just, I already laughed so hard just from these scenes in that video, in that music video, because those are scenes from the movie. And it's just hilarious. And also just how they mock America.
Can they not get away with doing it now? Are we too we're a bit too vanilla now? We can't get away with those sort of films.
Probably. I don't know, but it's just so hilarious. But anyway, just need to.
I just remember Matt Damon.
Yeah, Matt Damon. Matt Damon. Anyway, America, fuck yeah. So training whilst working abroad in Africa for 6. No, we had that one, didn't we? Training whilst abroad in Africa for 6 weeks, work with no access to the gym.
Yeah.
I think I'm doing metabolite sessions. Maybe he asked again because he was a little bit impatient or so. But I thought it was from someone else. Anyway, Wes, so our man who's always the first to comment on our videos, our man. So he's asking for whether we already have a name for the baby. And so
Good
just
question.
to answer that really, really quickly, I'm still hoping, and Katie is hoping too, that we are getting a boy. And we thought of Tony.
Not Steve.
Not Steve.
Fuck.
No, not Steve. So funny enough, because we just recently talked about English names, there is some, of course, there are people in Germany called Steven as well. But it is just there's something about English names when people are naming their German children English names. It sounds so off. And to be honest, I hope that I don't offend any one of our listeners, but just the how should I put it? So there's a demographic in Berlin, especially, who's living more so towards the eastern part of Berlin, and people are making fun of those people because they are just something like into techno. They are living in a poor environment and stuff like that. So it's not really that friendly to make fun of those, but everyone knows when someone is talking about these type of people, and they are actually naming their children I don't know, something like, especially Jacqueline, stuff like that. And so.
And I don't want to offend anyone, but it's better than Mercedes or something like this. Or
that's absolutely.
Do you know Jamie Oliver?
Yeah.
His kids have some very interesting names. I was just about to Google it. They have some, I can't remember what they are. They're very interesting to say the least.
Yeah. So
Tony,
that's why
so traditional.
Tony is actually pretty cool. And because of Hugo, right, we wanted then to think about, something that is kind of
proper
in
boy
that ballpark.
Names. Hugo
But that's not really that common of a boy name. Because we had a look at that top 25 list, and we didn't really want to pick a name from that list. So cliche, I know, want to be a little bit unique, but then it turns out in 10 years from now, everyone else was picking that name as well, right? So, but yeah, we thought Tony, and that might even be appropriate if it's going to turn out to be a girl, I think.
Tony? Oh.
Yeah.
Not heard of a female Tony, I don't know. It just makes me think of The Simpsons' Fat Tony, the
Fat
gangster.
Tony, yeah, totally. Oh yeah. No, I'm always thinking about The Shining from Stanley Kubrick.
I haven't seen
There's this little boy, right, who has The Shining, and his imaginary friend is called Tony, and he's always like, Tony, right? It's super creepy, but yeah. So it's going to be the imaginary friend from the creepy kid from Shining, Tony. So yeah, here you have it. So, oh God, this episode, mate, we're talking about so much about, all over the place. Terribly sorry for all of the listeners who stuck with this episode until now. Terribly sorry. You can actually post in the comment section below how much of a terrible episode that was. It's still highly appreciated. I mean, when you're commenting on that. Exactly. Bad promo is always good promo as well. So, Alexander, hey guys, let's say someone between 18 and 20 years old. In my case, I'm 18 and I want to bulk for a few months or even years. And then of that, I'll consider to cut to be shredded. But between my years of pure bulk, it will be best to do some mini cuts for keep sorry for the phrasing is a little bit off. It will be best to do some minicuts to keep my hormone levels compared to the standard cut.
Hormone?
Just for be a short, or sorry, but I have to rephrase it in my head. Because it says, just for be a short period of time. By the way, I don't have problems with food, relationship, or anything else.
I know what you're saying.
Okay, enjoy the content, guys. Congrats, Pascal, for becoming a father. Thank you very much. Greetings from Chile. So, thank you very much, Alexander. And sorry, I hope you didn't take it the wrong way. It was just a little bit hard to read. So, but I think that we understood the question, right? So when someone is actually planning to bulk for a couple of years, then implementing a couple of minicuts, will it still have the same hormonal responses as a normal conservative cut?
Well, okay, that was the question. Okay. I don't really know how to answer this. I don't really know what to say. I don't know what hormones he's trying to talk about or manipulate.
I would assume that the usual hormones we are talking about when it comes to leptin, ghrelin, testosterone, the usual sex hormones as well, cortisol levels probably as well, when we are talking about those kind of things.
So I don't know why I'm struggling with this question. He's basically saying, could he manipulate? He's taking a long period of time to go through a gaining phase. Can he drop in mini cuts, and these won't lead to negative adaptations because they're short? Basically, he's trying to get confirmation.
Yes, and I think that. So I will take over, okay, Steve, because I think I'm understanding where he's coming from. So I think his concern is whether a minicut has kind of more of a negative adaptation as a standard cut or conservative cutting phase has when it comes to your hormone panel, whether someone actually leads to more detrimental outcomes or has a higher impact on your overall hormone panel. And I think it won't. Minicuts are really, really short. We've talked about it previously already. They are most of the time implemented in a gaining phase where your hormone panel should be relatively good. I know a lot of people whose hormone panel, especially the sex hormones, are still a little bit off, but it shouldn't really have too much of a detrimental impact because a minicut is short and aggressive. So you're getting in and out as quickly as you can. And probably it has an impact, but it's only acute or temporary for that time frame. Same for the cut. Probably it's not as invasive. However, it's a little bit longer, and thus you're probably in a deprived state that has an impact on your hormones as well for a longer period of time. It doesn't have such a severe impact on your hormones, but it has because it's just the length of the cutting phase. And in the end, what it really boils down to is your overall body fat percentage and for how long you have deprived yourself. So when it comes to something like contest prep, it's the perfect scenario or perfect example. In that case, you're dieting for a really long time and up to really aggressive or low levels of body fat. So in that case, there's nearly no way around that your hormones are being impacted by that, and not just acutely, but also for a long period to follow, because your hormone levels are really, really a lot correlated with your body fat levels, or at least the potential energy you're having. This is a common thing you see with a lot of female athletes, that they are losing their menstrual cycle. This has nothing or not really that much to do with the leanness in it for itself, but more so the available potential energy. So an available potential energy is the amount of foods you're eating. So you're consuming that energy you have available, and the availability of your body fat storages. When your body fat storages are low and you're cutting at the same time, your available energy is pretty low as well. And that has an impact on your overall hormone levels as well. So when you're then reversing out of it, because your body fat levels are quite low at the same time, you still need to actually work your way up again. So it can potentially take a longer period of time for body fat levels to give you the the potential energy levels. I have that energy availability for your body in conjunction with the available energy coming from nutrition. So long story short, I don't think that it will have such a severe impact, or it will have any kind of different impact on your body, as long as it is in appropriate ranges, or they are kind of the outcomes are the same when it comes to comparing that with each other.
All I can think of is going hard is fine, going long is fine, hard and long, not going to be fun.
That's what she said.
That's what I was hoping you might say. We had to get innuendo.
God,
And I think he specifically brought up his age because he was concerned about that. I don't think, and especially as a male, you're fine. I'm not worried about it.
I think that when you're not overly fat or so, I think at your age, I would more so go with a minicut, because I would highly encourage you to be in a caloric surplus for as long as possible.
Yeah, especially if he's newer to training, he can still he can see good kind of recomping for a period of time as well, probably.
Yeah. So I think that the next question is from someone from Germany, or maybe from a German-speaking country, Der Matti. So it sounds a little bit Austrian, actually. So anyway, how do you train and distribute volume for body parts with a low work capacity? For me, biceps, for example. If you have only a few training sessions per week, does training them first or adding smaller sessions to your week make sense? Love the show. Keep up the good work.
So it's interesting, because I would have thought if you have a low work capacity, then it's kind of self-solving in a sense, because you just don't need to do much. So you don't need to worry about it. And we've talked about it many times, where there becomes a point where volume matched, you see kind of equal results, and frequency is a way to divvy up your volume. And so if you have a low work capacity, you probably don't need high frequency because you're not doing that much. So it's probably, I feel like it's more so a concern for someone who has like a really high work capacity. How do you fit all that volume in? And then it'll be a case of potentially higher frequencies. But if you have a low kind of work capacity, I don't know, it kind of makes it a little bit easier. I don't know.
So this is once again just an assumption, but I'm interpreting the question differently.
Okay.
That is that his work capacity is quite low. Thus, he can't accumulate as much volume as necessary for him to see potential growth in one single session. So let's just say you are doing something that is highly fatiguing for you. Let's just bring up the squats is always a great example, right? Because they are so highly fatiguing in one single session. Let's say you are really strong in squats, but you need a high amount of volume to see some progress. But you're only able to do like 2 sets per session. And then after that, you are just like destroyed because your work capacity is so low. Or it would take you like forever to then do the training session with the adequate amount of volume. So either this, you're extending the training session, taking longer rest periods in between, or I think it might be maybe a good idea to then distribute it over a couple of days. And because you brought up the biceps specifically, what I really like doing with a lot of my clients is actually spread it out to 4 days per week. And when you're doing something like a 4-day upper lower, just incorporate them on the lower body days as well. Or when you're even doing something like a push-pull legs, do them on both upper body days or even on the lower body days, just to get even an additional day that is only like specifically targeting the biceps, because we know that the biceps is highly involved in pulling exercises as well, so that you can hammer that specific muscle group quite a lot of times, but you are not suffering under your low work capacity in that sense. I hope that I interpreted your situation correctly.
Yeah, I think that makes much more sense, because when I was interpreting it, basically wasn't going to be a question. So that makes good sense. And the points you brought up are exactly correct in that's why we often go from like 3 times full body for like a beginner. Then you just can't get in the volume you need to in the 3 sessions. You go to upper, lower. Then maybe you go to push, pull legs. So for something like biceps specifically, I think, higher frequencies is a good idea. And I think undulation. So potentially doing more on like your pull days and then doing a little bit on your push days. I think that's a great idea. And it's just having an awareness of recovery curves. So making sure if you are upping your frequency, you're not training consistently sore, because that also probably isn't the best idea. Kind of train again once you're recovered, spread your volume out appropriately like that. That would probably help quite a lot. So if he's trying to get a lot in, like, and he's doing 3 sessions a week, like 4 is just going to help him so much.
And I think just to answer that question as well, because he was asking for potentially adding them at the beginning of a workout. And I think that when it comes to low work capacity, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing them first. If you want to specifically target that muscle group, yes, you could always make a case for then adding that towards the beginning of a workout to give it the highest attention. But when it only comes to work capacity related issues, I think distributing it over a couple of days will probably solve the issue.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's a big reason why a lot of more advanced guys move towards quad focused and then hamstring focused, is because they literally, if they focus on one, they can't focus on the other. And this is what happened to me. And that's why I've split mine to AM and PM, because I'm trying to kind of get around that issue. And I'm eventually probably going to find where it's just impossible to do that still. So it's really interesting.
So should we move on to the next question? Okay, so it is from Rick Sanchez. Do you know Rick Sanchez?
No.
From Rick and Morty.
Oh, that's his name.
Morty,
okay, yeah, I know.
Morty. I don't know if it's really his name. Really. That would be amazing. Rick Sanchez, eh? I'm bulking currently, eating 3,000 calories, and I'm at 140 pounds body weight. I'm aiming for 140 grams of protein, but I absolutely love meat. So my protein intake is usually around 180 to 500 grams. No, I just added the 500. Around 180 grams. Otherwise, my diet is high carb with around 0.3 grams per pound of fat. With around, so otherwise high carb, and the fat is around 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. Should I try to lower my protein to 140 grams, 1 gram per pound, to increase carbs or fat, or will it make minimal to no difference?
Cool. So I think it's a case of minimums. Once he's met minimum requirements for fat and carbohydrate, which if he's in a massing phase, he very probably is going to meet those quite easily, and probably is. Then if he wants to have more protein, then it's a case of he can have more protein. Out of kind of extreme scenarios where you like 500 grams, that would be like, no, that's not okay. You need to lower this down, but within kind of reasonable ranges, absolutely not a problem.
Yeah, totally. I don't see any kind of problem with that. This is something I tend to favor as well, because I actually do favor many of the meals or foods that are just naturally high in protein. So I tend to have a higher protein intake. It's funny when people are then throwing around with those protein recommendations, and the discussion sparks again between like the Menno Hanselmans.
They're like low.
Yeah, the more so on the low end, and then the Eric Helms out there, right? And I think that when you are in that range, somewhere in that range between those two recommendations, you're probably fine. And if you are going above that, you're probably not going to die. If that's just the way you prefer things, fine, right? The only thing I would recommend against is just going way too low. Other than that, I think you can be as creative as you want, and as long as you're making progress, I think it's really up for the individual.
I think the only time you have to be a little bit more careful with those is when you're dieting. It just becomes more like, maybe the extra carbs will really help that much more. But yeah, when you're massing, have a
absolutely.
Ball. And actually, it's interesting you brought up there's actually seen a few people recommending very high protein diets, which is just interesting to see that people are doing that. But I think that is a little bit of just potentially like old school bro enjoyment of high protein. I don't know how much actual research there is to back that sort of thing up.
Yeah, I mean, Jose Antonio has done a little bit of research in that area, but it's always like you have to take those studies with a little bit of grain of salt, because it was just reported, right? The people did track food log. Yes, the people were most of the time then also the ones who are more interested. So our man Ryan had Jose Antonio just recently on the podcast. We had him on the podcast talking about that as well with a higher protein intake. So go check that one out. But once again, it's not the be all end all, and only because that study has shown some interesting outcomes doesn't mean that you have to jump on the ultra high protein intake train.
Cool.
So I think we had that guy already. So Oisin, in the last few months, since starting to use RIR in my training, my estimations of 3 RIR have been awful. 3 RIR often feels the same as 6 RIR. And 1 or 2 RIR, I'm hit with a wall. Have you experience with clients who approach failure like this, and what this may mean? I should start mesocycles with 2 RIR, or is it something I should keep practicing?
So I've definitely had clients who have struggled with the reps in reserve concept initially. Maybe they haven't used it before. They're not exactly sure where to start. And I always say starting on the side of caution is always generally better, especially because the people who are normally coming to using it have already experienced training to failure. They know what that feels like. They are maybe an intermediate lifter, and now they're seeking, I mean, it's not often the case newbies are looking towards reps in reserve. It's normally someone who's actually, they've researched, they're looking into things, people listen to this podcast. So you already have like experience training to failure. So you know what that feels like. So you definitely on the side, like I'd edge on the side of caution in your earlier weeks. And I always say, even if you went too light that week, every week forward is going to get harder. You're going to be adding load, you're going to be progressing. So eventually you'll come to failure. You don't need to seek it. It will hit you because you'll be seeking to progressively overload. So I think it's kind of a self-solving issue, and it's not something you have to stress. What I would say is with clients, I've definitely seen, and this is why I think it's important, and you've referred to it before, Pascal, with Bryce Lewis, who he did his AMRAP. He looked like maybe he could have done more reps and people said he could. And he was like, no, that was me. And that's because rate of perceived exertion is individual to you as a person. It's your perceived exertion. Reps in reserve is your number of reps in reserve. I've had clients where I'm looking at them going and I'm like, you should have racked it. You should have racked it. You should have racked it. And they just go and I'm like, okay, you can grind. This is cool. Whereas I know, like sometimes I do a rep and it looks like I could do another one. I know in my head, I've had enough experience, I can't. It's something you learn over time and it is individual to you. I definitely recommend just like filming your video, your form, practicing. But like I say, if you edge on the side of caution, you progress through your mesocycle, you're going to hit failure eventually. And then you know where via your logbook where failure was. So you know if you were to leave some reps in reserve, if that's your 10 rep max, you're looking to hit 6 to 8 repetitions. You can use that with 4 reps in reserve or something along those lines. It kind of is a self-solving problem. I don't know if you've had the same experience, Pascal.
Yeah, I just want to try to give a different perspective on things. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is the way I do it with clients of mine or do it myself. But I also know that for some people, RIR is not the best thing. And I mean, yes, you can track it, but you shouldn't really orient yourself too much on the RIR, because some people are too conservative for RIRs and some people are too aggressive for RIRs. And they never get the whole of it, to be honest, because gauging RIRs is a skill that can be developed. But once again, if you're just simply too conservative, and that is just your nature, or when you're too aggressive, it is probably not the best metric to track. So in that case, probably you have to manipulate the variables in your training a little bit differently. And it is absolutely all right. For some people, they also have not really that high of a work capacity. They are dominantly slow twitch fibers. So when it then comes to that, maybe it's simply not for you that you're then doing like 3 RIRs or something like 4 RIR or something like that. Maybe you have to go closer to failure, and that is all right as well. But then it comes at the cost of probably accumulating volume in that session. But if you're then still in the range of creating adequate amount of metabolic disruption and a stimulus, could be potentially fine as well, I think.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's a good perspective to take as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just coming. So just to add on that one, because I have the feeling that many people are now in the realm of, okay, I have to accumulate volume. I have to stay a long way shy of failure. Yes, there have been, of course, a couple of studies by now showing that keeping some reps in reserve may be beneficial, right? But that doesn't mean that, once again, it applies to every single one individual. We also need to take into consideration the personality type as well, what the individual responds best to. And some people just respond very, very well to pushing it close to failure because it also aligns with their personality type. And I think that, just tinkering around a little bit will go a longer way than trying to imitate what some other people are doing because one deems that is the correct way to train. And to be honest, there is no correct way to train. The only correct way is to progress and stay injury free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I'd say in addition to this is quite funny when kind of people refer to leaving reps in reserve as easy training, because it's interesting to me because it certainly shouldn't be. When you think about what's the difference between 3 and 1 rep in reserve or not reps in reserve, it's literally like a couple of reps. It's not like miles apart. So it should feel difficult the entire time. And I think training to like 2 reps in reserve, like you were suggesting, that's a really fail-safe way to make sure you're training hard enough and still able to not super fatigue yourself. So on average, I think that's a great way to train.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there because, hey, mate, when I'm squatting or when I'm doing any kind of exercise, whether I'm doing 3 reps in reserve or 2 reps in reserve, I'm still sweating. My heart is still racing afterwards, right? And I still have to concentrate and give it my all. So yeah, I think it's just a poor man's argument if someone is actually then saying like the ones who are leaving reps in reserve are just pussies who are not training hard enough, because it's simply not true.
And eventually,
I know where they are coming. Yeah. I know where they are coming from, right? But it's simply not true. I mean, just look at, you brought him up as an example. Just look at someone like Bryce Lewis. I mean, he's a world champion, mate. I mean, and he leaves the reps in reserve. I mean, most of the time, those people bring then up like Dorian Yates and funny enough, Scott Stevenson, but we had him on the podcast. And funny enough, he isn't really that clear when it comes to pushing all the time to failure, right? And don't know. It's just something I just wanted to get off my chest as well because, yeah.
And I think it would be a good argument potentially if you always left 3 in the reserve, but because you go from like 3, 2, 1, 0, and you're accumulating quite often within that sort of schema, you potentially are accumulating sets. Some of those sessions where you're doing a lot of volume, quite a bit to failure, is very hard. Having just done one this morning, it's fucking some of the most challenging training I've ever done. I wish I only had 2 sets to failure, but it wasn't the case.
Yeah, don't know. It's again the thing of black and white thinking that there's always just one way.
Yeah, it's so nuanced.
And I mean, I'm going to failure on certain exercises at certain points in my meso cycle, but I always also leave reps in reserve. I mean, yeah, don't know. But anyway, I think that was the last question. I think that we can end it for today. We're is 1 hour now.
Minutes.
And do you have anything to say, Steve?
No, apart from I've left it to now to say I'm a little bit nervous. It's Valentine's and I'm spending it with 2 special people, Lyle and Mike.
Yeah, I was just like, 2 special people? Who's now... Do you have an open relationship now with Charlotte or what? Who are you inviting tonight?
We've got a screen show, a screenplay. It's going to be very aggressive if people are into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Some shouting may happen.
Like the red rooms on the dark web.
Yeah,
that's actually some pretty hefty shit, mate.
Unfortunately, I've not seen it, but I imagine. Yeah, I can.
Unfortunately, say fortunately, the red room. So basically, what a red room is that it is a live chat room where someone is being killed in front of the camera.
Oh my god! Okay.
Yeah.
So this is. I've seen films like that. What was it? Hostel.
Yeah.
That was
so. Unfortunately, mate.
Jesus Christ! No, fortunately as hell. I didn't know this sort of thing happened. Ugh. I'm too innocent.
Crazy world we're living in. Yeah. Crazy world we're living in.
So, guys,
we are sitting here and are complaining about, I don't know, not getting enough. Instagram followers. Check us out on Instagram.
When will the episode come out? Can we say that? Do you know when we might release it? No, not this episode. The one with Lyle and Mike. Assuming it all goes to plan. If you're listening to this and it hasn't, hopefully has happened.
145 or so, I would assume. I think right now we have everything pre-planned to episode 143, so it would make sense to actually throw it out as 145.
I'm going to big the hell out of that one.
Yeah. Like penetrating the shit out of it, you guys.
Right.
And the episode is going to be great as well.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. It only gets worse from now on.